Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be a January 2026 budget recap using my Budget by Paycheck workbook from the Budget Mom. If you're interested in seeing that, please stick around. As I said in my introduction, today's video is going to be a budget recap for January 2026. I definitely had a hard time keeping up with my usual budgeting methods at the end of 2025. I was still saving for sinking funds. I was still using variable expenses, but I wasn't really tracking everything like I normally do. And I hadn't closed out my budget, my monthly budget, in a very long time. And with January, I really wanted to recommit to being as diligent with my budget as possible. And I'm happy to say that I was able to keep up with every aspect of my budget in January 2026. We are looking at my monthly spread. All of my bills are checked off here. And as we cut forward to my budget recap pages for January, you'll see that things ended up going fairly well. So we're going to actually start off with the debt payment plan page. I'm going to zoom on in so that things are a little bit more clear. Currently, my only source of debt is my Nelnet student loans. I have an interest rate of 5.125%. My minimum payment, which technically doesn't really exist right now because I have federal student loans and they're on hold, is $400. And that's just kind of an arbitrary amount that I ended up choosing that I know I want to apply to my debt payments every month. Like, I, at a minimum, want to put $400 towards debt. If we take a look at my extra debt payments section, I have one debt payment that I made for $170 with my second paycheck of the month. And then my employer is currently helping to pay towards my student loans. They're basically paying $20,000 over 5 years, which, when you break that down, ends up being $333.33 a month. But my December 2025 payment went through late. So it actually ended up coming out in early January, and then my January 2026 payment came out later in the month. So those added together are $666.66, which means between my normal $400 payment and the extra, we have a total debt payment of $1,236.66 for the month of January. Now, I couldn't fully fill out this monthly debt progress section because I didn't close out my budget last month, but I do have $14,544.40 left in my student loans, which is, it's very exciting to be under the $15,000 mark. The overall debt progress section, I always mention that this $70,910.32 is what my total debt was in January 2022 when I purchased my car. I, at one point, probably had more debt than that with just my student loan debt. But by the time this rolled around, I had definitely paid off like at least $10,000 to $15,000 of student loan debt, as well as my first car that I bought years prior. With my overall total debt and my current debt balance, we've had progress of $56,365.92, or 79.5%, which is incredibly exciting. If we cut forward to my next page, we have our monthly net worth tracker. I don't have last month's net worth because I didn't close out my budget, and I do like to keep the breakdown of my assets private, which is why there's a post-it note here. If we go down towards the bottom, though, my total assets equal $542,009.39. And then we talked about on my last page how my total debt is $14,544 $1,000,000.40 from my student loans. So that means my net worth for January 2026 is $527,464.99. I couldn't do the comparison to last month, but I will be able to start doing that come February. And then the last page that we have to talk about is the monthly budget category breakdown, which is always my favorite section in the Budget by Paycheck workbook. If we start out on the top here, we have my starting balance, which is the cash that I rolled over from December 2025 into January 2026. This is a lot more than normal, but that's because I got paid on December 31st, 2025. So we started with $4,046.31. And then my earned income is always my income from my full-time job only. So that was $7,378.93. My other income section for January equaled to $1,086.34. The majority of that was the student loan payments that my employer made for me. I do have to include them in income in order to include them in my debt payoff so that my budget balances. So $666.66 of that is in here. And then I used $246.20 of savings in the month of January. All of that added together equals an inflow of $12,757.78. If we look at my budget categories and how I did throughout the month of January, food is a new one for me. This is a category that's now including my groceries as well as my eating out. So my monthly budget is $600 because I budget $300 a pay period towards it. I spent $417.27, so I was under budget by over $150, which is great. For gas, I do budget 50 a paycheck, so my total monthly was 100. I spent 47, so I was under budget by over $50. I do have a hybrid, that's why I tend to not spend as much money on gas. For miscellaneous, this is what I spend from my miscellaneous cash for my variable expenses. I have a $150 pay period budget, which equals $300 a month. I spent 108. That means I was under budget by almost $200. And then we have the unfortunate miscellaneous bills section, which is kind of the bane of my existence. I don't budget anything towards it because ideally, the number would be zero, but I did a lot of miscellaneous spending in the month of January. A big portion of that, though, and I don't know if I've mentioned it in a prior video, is that the condo that used to belong to my father, that now belongs to my sister and I, had an unfortunate water heater incident happen that required a lot of maintenance. And so a big chunk of this, like almost $2,000 of this, was because of that. So that's included in here because that had to be paid for. So hopefully in February, that number is a heck of a lot lower. Utilities is basically my home phone, my internet, my cable, and my cell phone. Total budget is 400. I spent 390.34, so I was under budget. For housing, it's usually $600. My January 2026, I didn't pull out until the beginning of the month because I got paid on December 31st, and then I pulled out for February, so that's why it's 1,200 on here. Giving is the $20 that I put to my church. I ended up giving $60 in general in the month of January, so I went over there, which is fine. For debt, again, I have that minimum that I always want to pay, which is 400. We talked about the 1236.66, so I was over budget there, which again I'm okay with. Personal is where my Netflix, Kindle Unlimited, my Libro FM, my Spotify, those expenses come out of. I budget 75. I spent 60.57, so I was under budget there, which is great.